Hey there, my name is Charlie Bathgate. I'm the CEO of Sanglucci.com and WallStreetJesus.com, and I have a question for you to think about as you watch this interview. And that question is, what would you give to be a trader who is consistent with not just profits, but with confidence? Like, what if every day when you opened up your trading screens, you had the confidence that you knew when to cut your losers, that you knew how to let your winners run, and that you had a read on sentiment that other traders would kill for? The truth is that the information that you need in order to feel that level of confidence is available to you for free in every single trading platform under the sun. It's just that nobody's ever taught you how to find that information and how to read that information. And what I'm talking about is tape reading, which is the subject of the interview that you're about to watch. Once you learn how to read tape, and once you see the markets through the lens of tape reading, you'll never see things the same way again. Your days of feeling like you're 2 steps behind will be behind you. So if you are interested in learning more about tape reading, I invite you to go over to Sanglucci.com/MC, learn more about the master course, and set up a call with a member of our team. The next live session of the Sanglucci Master Course starts in just a few weeks, so now is the time to get involved. Enjoy the interview.
Yeah, everybody, thank you for joining us. If you missed the first installment in this series with Lucci, I highly recommend that you go back to our YouTube channel and you check that out. It was a great interview where Lucci broke down what tape is for him, specifically how he reads the time and sales and the level 2, but then also more broadly what tape is as a way of viewing markets, how he as a trader views markets and understands just the fundamentals of buying and selling activity and how that drives price. That is the source of his edge that he's been using over the past 12 years as a extremely successful trader. So highly recommend you go back and check that out. And if you are watching this in the future, which most of you will be watching the recording, this has been a crazy past couple days. We have had Silicon Valley Bank's failure. We've had a run on regional banks. Today is Wednesday. What is it? March 15th. We have had threats to Credit Suisse potentially going under. So it's wild out there right now, and there's no better time to be talking about how to keep your head on straight with watching order flow, with watching tape. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, Jay, I just want to dive right into it with you and talk about your version of tape, how you read tape. You said on a recent Misfit Happy Hour episode that the flow is my tape. What did you mean when you said that? The flow is my tape.
Well, like when you hear Lucci or Ronchero or anybody who follows, I guess their version of the tape, tape, and I think Lucci did a great job of breaking this down in the last interview with you. Tape can be in a variety of different things. You got the tape in equities, you got the tape in the futures market, you got the tape in the options world, and interestingly enough, and it's weird when you think about it, when I think about it, I've been an equities guy my whole entire career. Like even to today, I trade both, but I always felt a lot more comfortable playing equities, playing the underlying rather than options or futures. Okay, and
Right.
a lot has to do with being able to manage my risk more effectively, and feeling comfortable has a lot to do with it. So, what's strange and both interesting at the same time is that being an equities guy primarily, I'm not looking at the tape in the equities market. You understand? I get my edge by looking at the tape in the options market, and especially early on in my career, for a lot of my career, I utilize that edge playing equities. You understand? So,
Yep.
now I play options more, but for a lot of my career, I would study the tape. I would look at the tape on a day-to-day basis in the options market and look for an edge to take advantage in the equities market. Okay, and
Yep.
you don't find that a lot. If people are looking at options tape, for example, they're trading options. If they're looking at the futures, they're trading futures, etc. So That's kind of a strange and weird when even I think about it. But like I said, Lucci broke it down to where they're buyers and sellers. You know what I mean? In everything that trades here. And what we're generally trying to look for on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of what we see is not actionable. You know, that's part of the process. You have to have a lot of patience till things line up a certain way and catch your eye. And you and I spoke about this. It's almost like putting the pieces of a puzzle together, you know? So, example, you see some buying or selling come in, and initially it may not mean anything. You know, you may not even pay much attention to it. But based on some further additional activity, you can see minutes, hours, or even days later, right? What you saw initially in that tape can put the whole story together, you know? So tape generally for me is, again, putting the pieces of the puzzle together to a story of buying and selling in markets, if that makes any sense. Okay?
That makes perfect sense, and that's exactly how Lucci framed it. And it's you know, it's interesting because when Lucci was talking about it, he was talking about looking at the time and sales in level 2, which is not exactly what you look at all the time. Of course, Lucci looks at what you look at as well, what you publish, because you guys, you know, work together in here. I mean, Jay, can you share your screen? Maybe we should just dive into that. Let's look at what you actually look at every day in order to curate all the flow that our members see, that you are, you know, prolific pushing out into Twitter and, you know, proprietary for our members and everything, and what you're basing your own trades on.
Yep. So this here on the left, and those of you who know me already know, I use Trade Alert, which has merged together with CBOE, basically. So they're one now. And I use them primarily for the day-to-day flow, okay? And I just want to make clear things up, because I think a lot of people don't realize or get the wrong impression. Flow has become a very popular thing, right? Especially options flow. More and more people play options, and hence seeing the size orders that come in, thinking it's smart money, big money, has really taken off over the last few years, especially. But the tape of the options market's not just looking at, again, individual orders, right? For me, an individual order comes in, and it's just an individual order until I look at the rest of the tape and get a better idea of what's going on. All right. This, because I just logged in on this screen, is not showing all the flow today, but you can see some of the action that came in. It looks like towards after the bell. Okay. So, an example, like here's a SPY sweep for tomorrow. Okay. Any names on here? I don't think. Oh, those are cancellations. All right, but what I'm looking at is not a scan, right? I'm not scanning for any size or unusual activity or anything like that. I'm basically looking at the whole tape and seeing orders that are coming in throughout the day. All right. So this is what I'm looking at. I get that question a lot too. People curious on what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at a scan. I'm looking to see where certain orders are trading all day long. So I'll give you an example, right? Let's say, and again, there's going to be a lot of action there. I'm trying to think. Oh, I'll give you a good one, right? Towards the end of the day, we saw some unusual activity come into a ticker, Daktronics, okay, D-A-K-T. So there was a couple little sweeps there, okay? So now just looking at that couple of sweeps that came in, I still don't know much about what's going on or has gone on throughout the day or even days off those orders, right? If you look across like the Twitter world or anywhere, some of the newcomers to options flow in general, they just talk about the actual orders that come in that either are unusual in nature or unusual in size. But for me, that's just the start. Right? And that's kind of just common sense. If I see an order, I need to dig into the rest of the flow around that name to see, are they closing another position and maybe rolling, right? Maybe the player's taking big profits off the table in another position and rolling a piece of those profits into what I just saw come across. So for me, right away, I see a couple sweeps come in, and I'll look at, the rest of the action for the day. And hopefully you guys can make this out here, right? So down here now, I can see all the activity, the active lines for that ticker, and see where things have traded today. Okay, so like I said, the two sweeps that caught my eye that came in late, came in right before the bell. And then when I pull up the rest of the flow in the name, I can see here now, look, July's has some more action around the two sweeps that I seen. There was also some buying in March. All right. So think about, without access to this information, I'm kind of in the dark, right? Does that make sense? Am I losing anybody? Am I losing you, Charlie, there?
No, it makes complete sense. I mean, you're describing the same process that Lucci described, where you're talking about putting information in context, right? And you're talking about building a narrative, right? Building a story, building a trade thesis of what the hell is going on. And I think what a lot of people do now, what everybody wants is some incredible piece of data, some incredible signal that they just see that and they're like, oh, buy, oh, sell, right?
Yeah.
But I think what you and Lucci are essentially saying is that that's the equivalent of opening up a book and reading a random sentence and thinking that that sentence represents the whole story for what's going on in the book. And you're like, that doesn't make any that doesn't make any sense. It's not how it works unless you understand the paragraphs before it, the paragraphs after it, unless you put it into context for the rest of the data that you guys are watching. Is that Is that right?
And I call that like the chasing unicorns process of this game. When you get into this game, everybody ideally, obviously, I'd love to set up something that just spits out actionable ideas that turn into winners, obviously. But that's not reality. That's not reality in anything at all in life. Right. If you put in the work, and you put in the time, you can develop an edge. And again, that's not just in markets. That's, like I said, business and everything that goes along in life. But I think what Lucci and I really are really fascinated by the tape is because we see this story being told in real time. You know what I mean? We see it being told in real time. And your edge is that there are not many other people that are seeing that same story, right? And when they find out about that story, and obviously if you think it's an exciting one, there's your edge, right? You're early to that process, and obviously can translate into upside or downside before anybody's eyeballs get on it, right? So like this Daktronics, for example, without me digging into the tape further, okay? So for example, two sweeps come in, interesting, unusual in nature, okay? But now I know that there's clean buying. There's legitimate buying coming into this name, okay? So let's say they came in earlier today instead of right before the bell. And I continue to see more accumulation in this little name. And you can see how unusual it is by the time all that volume came in, 25 times normal volume. Okay. So, and again, going back to the point I just made, this is 25 times normal volume by when the bell rang and all the volume was there. Okay. A lot of times by digging into the tape, you can pick up on this, when it's only one or two, two times normal volume, right? And then when it gets to 20 times normal volume, again, that's your edge, that in between, right? So again, just another perk to, the edge in looking at tape. But I was given the example that if I don't have access to the tape in this particular name, okay, there could be more buying that comes in, okay? But what about if we looked at the tape and we saw that there was some selling here instead of buying, okay? That would tell me now that somebody's just adjusting an existing position, and right. There really isn't anything too exciting about that. So if more buying is coming in and I saw some selling in the name, and I think somebody's just adjusting a position, even though more action's coming in, it's not actionable. It's not exciting, right? There's nothing to it. Somebody's just moving around a position. But knowing that there isn't any selling in a name, or even better, there's some buying around what I was seeing, then it can turn into something that becomes really interesting, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I think when we named this series Everything is Tape, because the takeaway from this whole thing, if there's one takeaway that we want you to have, is that you have to find your version of tape, which is watching order flow, right? Watching what buyers and sellers are doing in as close to real time as possible. And there's a million different ways to do that. Jay is talking right here about how he watches, flow and unusual options activity. Lucci was talking about looking at time and sales in level 2. A lot of our traders combine those two, right? Like Lucci looks at the flow that Jay uses, and then he's also using tape, right? So it's just like his version of tape, time and sales in level 2. He's layering those things on top of each other.
Well, let me give you an example. Let me give you a good example of Lucci. When Lucci was, when I first, obviously the first few years when I came with you guys, Lucci was obviously more active in the room, and we were working together. But you could see right away how what Lucci's looking at, and then the flow coming in, how it was a deadly combination for him. Of course,
Yep.
Basically, what he's looking at players setting up. So in other words, I'm seeing orders that are actually coming in where Lucci is even looking earlier in the process. He's looking for players that may be sitting on the bid looking to buy, or on the offer looking to sell. You understand? So he's seeing the players getting ready to take action, where I'm seeing the action come in. So I'll give you an example. Lucci could be looking at a pretty decent sized seller who's sitting on the offer, and they can't get him out of the way, right? Meaning buyers, there's just not enough buying to move that person off the offer and allow the stock to trade higher. Okay. But now all of a sudden, Lucci, by staring at the tape on his side, sees, a couple sweeps coming in as far as the flow is concerned, right? So now he's seeing buyers show up in the actual flow, right? And how aggressive they are. And now he could even almost predetermine, okay, they're going to take this guy out now. And then that's going to open up the window for upside. Because again, that seller is going to be moved out of the way, right? So
Yep.
that's where Lucci, he's almost taking it even a step further than I am. He's seeing how players are positioning before they even take action, before they actually buy or sell anything. They're bidding or offering stuff out there. And then the flow would just confirm that something's in play to what he had eyeballs on.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, he's just stacking up as many inputs into his trade thesis and to how he's going to kick the tires on his trade thesis as possible, right?
Yep.
And as long as those are the highest quality inputs that he can get, which again, as we've said, is actual market activity, actual buying and selling activity, or how buyers and sellers are positioning themselves on the bid and the offer, then he knows that he's going to be in a good place. I mean, Jay, I'm curious if the past couple days, we had a guy in our room, we had a trader in our room who made $900,000, over $900,000 on Thursday,
Yeah.
with the banks just getting crushed.
Yeah.
Does your sort of relationship to tape, I mean, do you feel it? Do you feel moments like this that are just crazy in the markets, that are frothy like this, where the action is nuts? Do you feel it in a different way when you're watching order flow like this? I know you also have sounds
Right.
that make different. You have guy, I don't know if you guys don't know this if you're not in the room, but Jay has various sound effects that are going off. Can you explain, Jay, what you have and how you can actually hear your version of tape?
Yeah, so basically, like I'm saying, I'm looking on the options end, right? So I have a good idea of when buyers or sellers are getting aggressive in the options world, okay? But the rest of the stuff out there, right? Like I explained earlier, you got equities and futures, and for me, sound effects more suited for the futures market is what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. there are products out there that allow you to almost, instead of see a time of sales, you can hear the time in sales coming in. So you hear different sound effects as buying and selling is coming into ES or the NASDAQ. Something we like to use, and it's quite effective, is VIX. So when we hear aggressive, let me line it up for you so you can understand, right? We're seeing some call sweeper activity starting to get aggressive. Okay, they're coming in, right? I'm seeing on this tape here, SPY sweeper, now some Apple calls, some Amazon calls, some Tesla calls, okay? And we could see the market kind of like getting ready to gear up and break out, per se, okay? Now, in the background, we're hearing the sound effects of aggressive selling in the VIX futures market, okay? And for those of you, I know most of you understand this, but anybody who's a novice, a lot of times when they sell VIX aggressively, it translates into buying the indexes, right? So if we're seeing aggressive sweeper buying coming into indexes and high beta in the option world, and in the background we're hearing aggressive selling in the VIX futures market, that's a nice combination. Again, it's almost like a wind at your back type thing, right? Are you, and a lot of you guys are going to realize this the more you're in this game, you look at everything as odds and probability, right? I know it's corny, but there's no other way. There's no certainty in this game. There's no such thing. So the way I look at every tool, and tape being, one of my most important, obviously, is does the probability, the odds of me finding success on a particular trade go higher if sweepers are confirming and I'm hearing in the futures market, right, tape confirming that as well? And obviously the answer is yes, right? And again, you're placing a bet, right? We're all placing bets up, down, bullish, bearish, right? And just it's like 50-50. But if you utilize tape, right, in the proper way, and a lot takes, just being patient and waiting for those setups, it can bump those odds to, you got a higher probability than 50% of finding success. 60, right? Depending on the strength of the signal, maybe even 70. There's your edge. Yeah. That's your edge.
Yeah.
People don't realize, Charlie, that's what an edge is. It's not a crystal ball that spits out winners. It's not somebody on Twitter that's red hot and you can sit back and read their tweets and make money every time. That's not an edge, right? An edge is what I'm explaining to you, right? If you can bump the odds of you finding success on that trade from 50-50 to 60-40, right? You do that 20 different times, you will make money, right? And that's your edge.
Right. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, is why we get people who come in and they ask us about, the master course and learning from, from you and from Lucci and stuff. And they're like, well, but I've already put like a couple years into my trading strategy. I'm decent with technical analysis. I'm pretty good. I just need to get over this hump. Right. And we're like, you don't need to throw out. We're not telling you got to throw out everything you're doing. We're saying add in tape. What we are going to teach you, tape, and you will choose sort of the version of tape that works for you, and that will be the thing that bumps you over into having consistent edge, right? So. Yep.
That's what it's all about. You know what I mean? That's what it's all about. And over the course of your career in this game, you're going to find, a certain amount of tools that you become comfortable with, and that you have the conviction that over time allows you to win more than you lose, and that's your edge. By the way, that's a very common thing with tape, or my version of the tape reading options flow. A lot of people are using it with something else. You know what I mean? Because like you said, they believe in that something else they're using. They just have a tendency to spin their wheels. They can't get over the hump. But they realize that now they have almost like a confirmation signal that will Again, just bump the probability and the odds of them finding success that much more, and that's the difference. And that's the difference.
Yeah, Ron Friedman, creator of Trading the Post, who I'm going to be on, who's going to be on with us in our next episode, is a perfect example of that. He was a really good options trader. He knew how to trade very well. He was, been trading for 15 years, and then he found Lucci as a mentor. He learned tape. He found Jay and started watching Flow, and it was like steroids for his strategy. It just took him, through the roof. So that conversation we have next week is going to be really good.
And he's a big technicals, he likes to look at technicals. He likes to look at levels, he knows he can make money with that stuff. But the tape is just that added boost that takes him to a different level.
Yeah, exactly. Jay, I've got this theory, this metaphor that I want to run past you to see if you think that this holds water, right? So we've been talking about tape and tape reading as a way to view. It's not just a skill set like what you're talking about. It's not just looking at unusual options activity. It's not just looking at the time and sales in level 2. It's also just a lens through which to understand all markets. And the analogy that I gave that we were talking about earlier in the week was like salespeople, right? Everyone knows, like, there's two types of salespeople. There's the type of sales guy at a company who can sell one product. Like you can teach him how to sell ketchup, and he can understand. He reads the formula of, okay, the playbook. Okay, this is how I get over their objections about it's not Heinz, it's this, and it's not sweet enough, it's this. Okay. I know how to sell ketchup. But if you ask that guy to sell mustard or sell flat screen TVs or sell cars or whatever, he can't do it, right? He is like a very, he's a very narrow salesperson. Right. And then there are people who can just sell anything. They can sell Ice the Eskimos, like, ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves, little Tommy Boy reference for you all there. They can sell anything because they just understand human psychology. They understand human behavior. They just understand how it all works. Right. And the reason I'm giving this analogy is because I feel like tape readers are like, they just understand how markets work. And that's why Lucci can sit there and say, you can give me a time and sales on level 2. Give me tape on any security, any instrument in the world. I don't care if it's futures, if it's crypto, whatever. I can trade it because I understand how buyers and sellers come together, how human behavior works to move markets. And for you, you came up in a world in which your dad, you've talked about this a lot, your dad was a bettor, was always betting on horses, right? Do you feel like that was your education in just how markets work, in how betting works, and you were just like, okay, I'm just gonna, this is the same thing, equities, options, it's the same basic principles, except it's not horses, it's tickers.
Yeah, I think is a big portion of what I do today and how I go about it on both sides. I learned at a young age how the degenerate gambler who, just enjoys gambling, right? More obviously would like to make money, but just enjoys it too much to allow himself to make money. So I learned, the characteristics you have to try to avoid to become that per se, right? And that applies to the market. You can apply that to 90% of the new traders, the post-COVID traders, or anybody who comes into this game. You know what I mean? Because again, what's the allure to this game? It's gambling. You know what I mean? It's gambling. You're trying to gamble for a living, and I think
trying to gamble with edge, right?
Right.
You're trying to have some kind of edge against the house.
But that's what I learned, and this was the difference. My father wasn't a professional gambler. He was a degenerate gambler. Okay, but he hung around, his friends were professional gamblers. And that's the crazy part about it. So I saw how my father could botch that opportunity, okay? Still, the degenerate instincts and not containing those instincts, even being around the source that you needed to be around to make money gambling, he still couldn't do it because he couldn't put what he needed to do into action, right? So that's the degenerate part. And being around my father's friends, I saw how these professional gamblers, what they had to do to not work a day in their life and rely on gambling to make a living, right? And I give people an example, and probably everybody on this webinar can relate. You know, there was like literally when I was young, I used to go to the racetrack every single day in the summer with my father and friends, every day, okay? Pick up the racing form, and I'm going to go right to Monmouth Park in Jersey or Belmont. Every day was a racetrack, if not multiple racetracks that day, okay? But I'll tell you the difference, okay? When my father would go with his professional gambling friends, okay, and my father would bet, there were 12 races that day, he would bet all 12, and he'd be looking for another one to bet on if he could, okay? He wouldn't miss a race. He bet every single race, okay? And that's what he did every day, okay? And he would get tips from the professional gambling friends that he had. More would win than lose, but my father would still find a way to lose money because he bet every single race. And I remember one guy I was really envious of when I was young, a kid. One of my father's friends was a professional gambler by the name of Tony, and we would sit at this in the restaurant of the racetrack, and he would sit there sipping his coffee. He would eat, breakfast and lunch. He had binoculars. He was watching the races, but he wasn't betting on these races. He would come to the track, and literally there'd be one race that he went to the track to bet on. One race. All the other races, while my father was losing all his money, he didn't lose a dime. He was eating his dessert, eating his food, just enjoying the day, okay? But he knew he had an edge on just that one race, and he pounded that one race. You understand? He just pounded that one race. And I used to say to him, I say, Tony, how do you come here, right? And you see, like my father's betting all these races. You just come here and you don't bet any of these races. You come here and you bet the 9th race out of all races, and that's it. And if the answer, basically rewording it a bit, was if I really want to make money at this, I can't bet all these races. You know what I mean? I know I'm going to lose money. Okay, it's a simple. It's not something I got to figure out. I know I'm going to lose money if I bet all these races. I don't have a chance. But if I come here, everything I just bet the 1 or 2 races that I have an edge in, I know at the end of it, when it's all said and done, I'm going to make money. You know what I mean? And that's the difference, right? Even with tape, there are going to be days, many days, where you watch the whole tape and nothing comes out of it. There's no story to be told. There's nothing interesting, right? But when the one day you're around and things start to line up and come together and you're ready to pounce on it, right? That's where your edge is, and that's where you're going to pick up the money. It's not from betting every stock tip you see or coming in and playing something every day. You know what I mean? And it lined up perfectly. What I saw in the gambling world, my whole childhood, things to do and not to do, and in comparison to what we do in the market every day.
Yeah. So that explains why you're so damn disciplined, because you wanted to be like Tony and not like your dad, basically.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And, again, that's the beauty of this game. I say it sounds corny, but I say it to everyone. The market will teach you what not to do. Okay? The market will tell you and show you, sometimes in a very painful way, what you have to avoid. Okay? So you're gonna know that. You're gonna learn that early on. It's not something that you got to stick around 20 years to learn in this game. This game does a great job of teaching you all these things. But if you choose to keep doing the things that you're probably going to lose money in, right? I mean, it's honestly, it's that easy. Now, putting it into action, right? The patience and the discipline, because again, that all goes back to how we're all wired in a similar way. We're all degenerates, we all want action. We all want to have fun doing it. But if you make the decision you want to do this and have an edge and make money and have success doing it, There are certain things you have to avoid doing, and certain things you have to be ready to do. And there are certain days you have to sit around and watch the whole tape, and nothing comes out of it.
Yeah. I mean, what you just said is spot on. It's exactly in line with what Lucha would say, which is the tape doesn't lie, right?
Yeah.
And what you're saying, like the market will tell you what to do if you just listen to it. Honestly, what we like, it's what we hear a lot from people who learn how to read tape and they they learn how to get in sync with the actual pulse, like the energy of the market. They're like, I've just shifted my perspective entirely from chasing to just basically receiving, right? Like I'm literally reading. I'm reading the market. I'm letting it sort of flow through me and then reacting to what is going on. And I think what people start to struggle with is like, can they handle, this sounds cliche almost, but can they handle it? Can they handle that much truth? Because sometimes you wake up and you want that trade to be there and the tape is like, it's not fucking there.
Yep.
And then there's days where where the market is funneling so much energy and so much activity through you that it's like, can you handle that? And you start to get in. That's where the psychology comes in. That's why we obviously focus so much on psychology as well in the master course, because that's when it starts to be, can you handle what the market is throwing at you?
Yeah, and listen, I'm not gonna try to make myself out to be some nun that I sit there and I don't get the itch to play, and you just
your name's Wall Street Jesus.
yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, if you are a degenerate like myself and you can't just sit there and avoid the action completely, then you got to take measures and do something about it to avoid wiping out the days you will have that edge. You understand? So, example, on a day like today, okay, for me, it was the total opposite of the type of day I'm usually looking for. Okay, meaning that the momentum was to the downside in individual names, not even the indexes, for most of the day. I'm on an intraday basis, long only, okay, on the other side of individual names, right? So that's the complete opposite. Now, I can go and try to buy, 3, 4, 5 different names throughout the day and bump my head into the wall and go nowhere, okay? If I choose to do that, I got to make sure I'm sizing down, knowing that I have no edge. You understand? So at least I'm not wiping out the days that I have an edge on. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? If I take these little minor cuts on days where I may not have an edge and I'm playing just to play because I'm a degenerate, the last thing I want to do is have that offset the days that line up perfectly, and I can make a good amount of money in, And like you brought up Horizon earlier, okay? He plays both sides. He plays long side calls and short side puts, right?
That's our member who
puts
off like a $900,000 trade.
Right,
yeah.
And they're going to be days where I'm sure he's trying to buy puts on the indexes or names, and they have no momentum, okay? And again, you got to understand that those are the days you need to size down and realize that you really don't have much of an edge. And then that one day, a lot of times it don't even come when you expect it, where you see sweepers bombing and tattooing regional banks on the put side, like these things are going to zero by the close, okay? That's a day you may want to open up if you play the downside and take a shot, right, on the put side. So, and I think, again, I'm not speaking for him, but I think that's what he did. Obviously, that's why he translated into a big number on that particular day. Things just happened to line up. That story came together that particular day. You understand? No other day. That particular day, that story came together, and he was ready to pounce on it.
And that trade comes together because he was watching. I mean, he said it to you. He was like, I never would have caught that trade if I wasn't watching the flow that you were, that you've taught me how to watch.
And
like,
to his credit, Charlie, you got to be around to notice that. You understand? A lot of people,
yes.
they get bored by it, or if they see there's nothing interesting going on, they rather do something else. Let me go out.
Oh, 100%. No, That's the kind of thing, and maybe other services would be out here and they would say like, oh, he made 900 grand in a morning. That trade is years in the making, right? Like that's everything coming together. That's all of the work that he's put in order to make a trade like that happen. So no one's here saying that something like that is easy, or unless you just get completely fucking lucky and you buy some lotto option and it just you're right place, right time, which never happens. don't chase that. But he was what I'm saying is he's there, in sync, tapped into the ebbs and flows of actual buying and selling activity, and he could react, in the split second that he needed to in order to put on the sides necessary to take down a trade like that. And if you're chasing news, or if you're using some kind of lagging indicator or whatever to as the input into your trading process, like you're not going to be able to hit trades like that,
Yeah.
and not everybody has to make a $900,000 trade to make their year. Obviously, we know that that's not what everybody's out here to do, but I think people.
No, and the dollar amount, listen, the dollar amount's always important, but the dollar amount really is not important to what we're trying to talk about here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's about just exactly what we were referring to earlier. Things coming together, and the timing of it usually is lucky. A lot of times these things, sometimes they do, but sometimes they happen to come together without you looking for it or expecting it, in a sense. You know what I mean?
But you got to be there watching
Yeah,
for it, right?
exactly.
Like Chris Cady, who's coming on for our fourth interview in this, always, is famous saying like, some days they just give out $1,000.
Exactly. That's the perfect line.
Job,
That's the perfect line. Exactly.
And your job is to be there and to spot like, holy shit, they are giving out $1,000 bills right now. I can see it in the tape, and to pick up your $1,000 bill before somebody else takes it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the game.
Yeah, and to break it down into simplicity for those of you like who follow Flow, speaking of the day they're giving away money, it's in other words a metaphor for it. Some days they're out there, right, and they're just tripping over themselves, buying everything, getting long. You get this rip up, trending day, melt up. Sometimes the timing of it, let's say the market's down, so you don't have to chase and you feel more comfortable, right? There are days those things all line up, and those are the days that's when you're gonna make a dent. The other days where you almost feel uncomfortable, right? You have to chase, or the flow is not cooperating, right? You know how many times, and that's what I do. A lot of people who ask the question obviously don't realize what we're trying to do. Like a lot of times I'll post manually little sweeps, okay? Not because they're actionable, but just so people get their eyeballs on things as potentially they may develop. You understand? Like if I see little interesting Apple sweep come in, it's just one sweep in Apple. It means nothing, right? One word means nothing in a name like that, okay? But if it gets your eyeballs on the name, on the chart, and you start to see a setup that looks interesting to you, and now some more buying comes in, right? We see some more buying in the flow in the tape coming in, right? Now you're ready to pounce on it. Otherwise, how else would you be ready? It's impossible. And that's where a lot of newer traders, they're in too late, or they, getting out before they should, or whatever the case may be. It's, again, the edge is in that, the edge is in that, allowing you to hang around for when things line up your way.
Yeah. It's something I've noticed when you talk to veteran profitable traders. When they talk about a trade that they've taken down, they will say things to the effect of, I knew this thing was moving, right? They know that no one questions, well, how did you know? Because they're watching what is determining price, right? The only thing that they're talking about is how they executed. How did they play the trade thesis? How did they actually profit from the move? But they know that the move is happening, and Jay, it's because it's exactly what you're talking about. They're picking up all these little pieces of information, all these little pieces of tape, like what you're talking about, just a little Apple sweep. It's just going into the backlog, right? It's going into the narrative building power of their brain that is then building up the view of the market, the understanding of what's happening in a name or what's happening in overall sentiment, and then they can just feel these moves come together.
Yeah.
And then it's just about
There's
how
another
you
thing I want to give an example of, like, let me get the entire screen here. Of another thing like Lucci used to do so well. That, again, not a lot of people can do this specific thing and have the patience and just the resilience and the persistence in doing it. Let's take a name, I don't know, like an Apple, for example, or something. And everybody knows Lucci loves the short side. You know what I mean?
Yep.
He's a dark sider. He likes to think
He's a
see
dark
things
sider.
burning around him.
Yep.
But, like, for example, so Lucci would be watching. He'd be looking for a short in Apple. Okay, but he sees that the bid is strong. There are players bidding for the stock. Okay, it's at a certain level that if it can break this level, he knows he can see some decent downside on the trade. But there's a buyer holding it up. Okay, so what he'll do is, like, let's say today, he's looking at the stock and he sees that he'll take a nibble, he'll take a stab on a little short. Just throw an order in there, and nothing would pan out. Like, nothing would transpire. Like, he was hoping to see maybe more sellers in the stock or a breakable level, and he'd scratch it out, right? And then he'll do it a couple of days later if he sees the same setup, and then again, just like flushing it down the toilet bowl. Small little stab. He would take these stabs, and it almost would be like he's testing the market, the waters, to see what was going on. That's how he would, in other words, that's where he would keep his focus. And then all of a sudden, like, boom, boom, ding, 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 the opening bell comes, and now here come put sweepers right off the open in Apple. Boom, boom, boom. Now he knows about that setup that he's been watching for 7 days, taking a stab at, right? And now he sees these aggressive bear bets come whistling in today, not yesterday, not the day before, not the day prior, but today, right off the open, for whatever reason, right? Yep. That's where he would be ready to pounce. You understand? And that's where he would get in, short some, it'd break, he'd add, you understand? And then he'd make a killing on that short. But a lot of people don't realize that day was a week, at least sometimes even more, in the works. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then it all came together, and that's where he picked up the money.
It's his way of putting his finger on the pulse of the market. It's his way of getting his brain to link in and remember to put his finger on the pulse. And I remember when I first started working with Lucci and watching him trade, and I was like, "Why are you putting all these feelers?"
Right, feelers. I was searching for the word feelers. That's what he would call it, feelers.
And I was like, why don't you just remember, like, watch the name?
Right.
Why do you have to put a feeler in? He was like, no. That's how my brain works. I have to put a feeler in. But it's literally like, instead of sitting next to the river and saying, like, where's the current going? He's putting in a little, like, food dye.
Yeah.
And it's like, he's like, okay, now I can see where this is going. And that's how he pulls down these, these trades.
And then, again, he's not concerning himself about the little money he lost on those feelers or scratching out on those feelers. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because, again, if it does line up, it's going to be well worth it, obviously. So, but that's just a perfect example of, of using his, like, the way he uses the tape. And that's what he does. Again, he's not coming in every day, hitting something hard and making a score every day like people portray on Twitter. You know what I mean? He's, like you're saying, he's taking feelers here and there until something lines up his way, and that's when you'll see he'll put up big numbers.
Yep. Yeah. I think this is a pretty good place to start wrapping. I hope you guys are getting kind of what we're putting down, in that, yes, when we say tape reading, we are talking about looking at the time and sales and level 2, like what Lucci actually does. But we're talking about a broader skill set. We're talking about your way of finding your tape, which is, how are you going to watch order flow? How are you going to watch market participants? How are you going to watch what buyers and sellers are doing and place your trades accordingly? And Jay just kind of took you through some of his process here. We're going to talk to Ronch in next week's episode, so that'll be Wednesday of next week. And then we're going to talk to Chris Cady after that, and how he does the same thing with market profile and the various data segmentation softwares that he has. So there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat. You just got to find your tape, what works for you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. If you all, we got some questions about the master course, just go to sanglucci.com/MC, and we give you a bunch of information on what's covered in the master course, and then you can also book a call with a member of our team. That's the best way to get all your questions answered. We will definitely do that for you. So, or shoot us an email, contact@sanglucci.com. Any way that works for you. All right, Jay, appreciate you, man. Always appreciate you hopping on, breaking it down, man.
Shop.
All right.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy the rest of the night.
All right, see ya.
Bye-bye.